When a defendant walks in, the courtroom shifts instantly. A simple hearing suddenly turns into a battle between truth, fear, and responsibility. What begins as a routine sentencing becomes a moment where one wrong word could change someone's entire future. This isn't just law. It's a fight for what's right, and everyone in the room feels a weight of what's coming next. Watch how the defense attorney moves. Miss Holmes doesn't argue with anger. She argues with humanity. Instead of talking about the crime, she talks about the person behind it. She paints Julia as someone who made a mistake, not as a criminal. It's a classic strategy. Show the judge a human being, not the danger. But the question is, will it work? Deferred adjudication, the legal version of a second chance. No conviction if the defendant stays clean and follows every rule. On paper, it sounds like a perfect opportunity for redemption. But in real life, one slip can turn mercy into a disaster. The courtroom pauses for a beat, because everyone knows the prosecution hasn't had their say yet. And when they do, everything could flip. And there it is, the moment that hits like a punch to the chest. The prosecution reveals why this case is much darker than it seems. This wasn't just a lie. It may have protected someone involved in a murder. Suddenly, fear, pressure, and confusion collide. Now the question becomes moral, not legal. If someone hides the truth about a killing, even out of fear, do they deserve mercy? This is where a judge earns every piece of their experience. You can hear the struggle in her voice, compassion on one side, accountability on the other. She understands Julia might have been scared, but silence cost the family the truth. Sentencing isn't easy. It's the loudest conflict between the heart and the law, and everyone in the room feels it. Jimmy Taylor takes a slow step forward, carrying years of broken promises behind him. The judge remembers everything, every warning, every chance, every relapse. The courtroom grows quiet as she confronts the reality that time is running out. And when she opens the file again, the whole room knows. Today might be his last shot. As Taylor tries to explain his struggle, transportation issues, trauma, addiction, the judge stops him at every turn. She's heard these stories before from him. Each excuse breaks under the weight of his history. The courtroom becomes a place where truth finally catches up, and Taylor is left with only one question. Will the judge offer mercy or consequence? Taylor's attorney fights hard, painting him as a man stuck in the cycle of poverty and addiction. But the judge counters with a timeline full of ignored opportunities. ISF safe, parole help he refused, promises he didn't keep. When the prosecutor adds that Taylor blames the system instead of himself, the judge's decision becomes clear. 12 years. And one wrong move in the courtroom could make it even longer. A major legal turn, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a second-degree felony. The judge mentions an 8-year cap from the plea deal, but her tone says everything. Just because there's a limit doesn't mean she has to be lenient. Behind every number is a story, and this one isn't looking good. When a judge compliments a lawyer on a plea deal, it's rarely a good sign. It usually means the defendant avoided something much worse. And in this case, you can hear the tension. The defendant might not realize just how lucky they were. But luck doesn't erase responsibility. And the judge is about to remind everyone of that. The prosecution reveals a pattern, the timeline of crimes. It rises and falls like a broken stock market graph. Each spike means a new arrest, a new violation, a new warning ignored. Judges look at charts like this and ask the hardest question. Are we out of options? And this one feels dangerously close to the end. Now the story turns personal. Childhood trauma, ADHD, medication changes, abuse, instability. These details hit deep because they explain how someone spirals into chaos. But in a courtroom, explanation and justification are not the same thing. The judge has to decide which one she's hearing, and that decision will shape the sentence. Mental illness mixed with violent hallucinations. Every judge's nightmare. The courtroom becomes a debate between two dangers. Do you trust a medication and offer probation, or protect the public from unpredictable behavior? There is no perfect answer, just a choice between risk and responsibility. The judge confirms the plea, second-degree felony, accident involving death. In Texas, that's 2 to 20 years. The 15-year cap means the defense negotiated the ceiling, but the floor? That's wide open. Every detail in this hearing could push the number up or down. And everyone knows the judge is listening carefully. The defense begins their strategy. Frame this as a tragic accident, not a reckless crime. In cases involving death, storytelling becomes everything. If the judge sees panic instead of intent, mercy might be possible. But if she sees a lie, everything collapses. A powerful moment. The defense highlights the immigration hold. Even if the judge grants probation, immigration will detain him anyway. It's their way of saying, punishment is inevitable. Prison isn't the only consequence. It's a subtle play. But in a tight case, small details can shift big decisions. The defendant apologizes, voice shaking. But the judge leans in with one piercing question. Are you telling me you didn't know you hit someone? That question carries enormous legal weight. If he knew and ran, it becomes failure to stop and render aid, one of Texas's harshest crimes. His answer would define his future. The prosecution fires back, dismantling the defense narrative. Their argument is sharp. He absolutely knew he hit a person, lied, then ran. In a sentencing hearing, credibility is everything. If the judge believed the prosecution, the tone of this entire case changes, and not in the defendant's favor. The courtroom goes silent as the prosecutor explains how the defendant's story changed again and again. Each version bends slightly away from the truth, and the judge knows this pattern well. Lies don't have to be loud. Sometimes they whisper through inconsistencies. And when someone's freedom is on the line, even a small change in the story becomes a massive red flag. Here comes a moment every defendant fears. The judge begins summarizing the case in her own words. And when a judge starts with, "Here's what concerns me," everyone listens. She walks through each detail, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence. By the time she finishes, the room already knows the sentence is leaning in one direction, and it's not the softer one. When the victim's family steps forward, the energy shifts. Their voices tremble, but their message is strong. A life was lost, and nothing can bring it back. Judges don't sentence only with the law. They sentence with human reality. And the reality here is pain, unanswered questions, and a hole left in a family that will never be filled again. The judge looks at the defendant one last time, searching for sincerity, responsibility, anything that shows genuine remorse. But what she hears instead is hesitation, a story that still doesn't match the evidence. In that moment, mercy becomes nearly impossible. And when she finally announces the sentence, the weight hits the defendant like a falling wall. A new defendant steps up, shaking slightly. The charges aren't small: possession, evasion, and violating probation. His attorney tries to paint a picture of a man overwhelmed by life, not a criminal. But the judge has seen this pattern before. Run from the police, apologize in court. Run again, apologize again. Today, the judge wants action, not promises. The prosecutor opens the jail report, and the room stiffens. Dozens of disciplinary write-ups, fights, disrespect, rule-breaking. Judges consider jail behavior as a preview of how someone behaves in society. If a person can't follow rules inside a controlled environment, how will they follow them outside? That question becomes the heart of the case. The judge tries to help by offering programs, counseling, structure, but nothing sticks. Every suggestion is met with another excuse. At some point, compassion becomes frustration, and frustration becomes consequence. When she speaks this time, her voice is firm. "You have run out of chances." And for the first time, he seems to realize she means it. A young defendant enters, just 17 years old. The judge clearly wants to save him from a lifetime of trouble. She talks to him like someone who believes he can still change. But then the file opens and everything shifts. Violence in detention, gang ties, threats, chaos. Age doesn't erase danger. And in Texas law, youth is not a shield. The judge explains the offer he had. Deferred probation, a miracle in the legal world. All he had to do was stay out of trouble. Instead, he created 21 incident reports in less than a year. It's almost unbelievable. The judge sighs, and for a moment, she seems more sad than angry. Because sometimes the hardest cases are the ones you try to save. When he takes responsibility, The court listens closely, but then he tries to justify the fights, the threats, the rule-breaking, and that's where everything collapses. Responsibility and excuses cannot stand beside each other. By the time he stops talking, the judge has heard enough. The plea deal is gone. The real sentence begins. Another case, another twist. This defendant arrives confident, thinking the plea deal is locked in, but the judge is not convinced. She calls out disrespect in court, past violations, and behavior that shows he isn't ready for freedom. When a judge says not today, it doesn't mean maybe later. It often means you've already used every chance you had. A young father stands before the court, shaking. No GED, no job, a history of drugs and failed programs. Probation could save him if he can follow the rules, but probation can also break him if he ever slips. The judge tries to warn him, this is your last fork in the road. He nods, but even he doesn't look convinced he can make it. The judge goes down the list of conditions, classes, drug testing, counseling, fines. It's a mountain of responsibility. For some people, probation is freedom. For others, it's a trap. The question in the room is simple. Will he climb the mountain or fall under the weight of it? We return to the defendant facing gun-related charges. The judge asks about the night of the shooting. His voice shakes as he tries to explain. But one detail doesn't match the reports. One detail doesn't match the witnesses. And one detail doesn't match his earlier statement. Judges don't need full contradictions. One crack in the story can reveal everything. The prosecutor details each bullet fired, each risk, each home, each innocent person nearby. The judge listens with a tight jaw. This isn't just reckless behavior. It's life-threatening violence. And the courtroom begins to shift from sympathy to fear. The defense tries hard to show he's young, still learning, still capable of change. They talk about family support, new goals, improved attitude. But the judge sees the other side, too, choices that could have killed someone. When youth and violence mix, the law cannot ignore the danger. Another defendant steps forward in an orange jumpsuit. This time, it's about drugs, running from police, violating conditions. He says he's ready to change. The judge looks at him carefully. Try to see if he truly means it. But his file is full of broken promises, and broken promises echo loudly in a courtroom. The prosecutor lists every failure. Missed tests, skipped programs, ignored warnings. Judges don't expect perfection. They expect effort. And there is no effort in this file. When the judge speaks, the room stiffens. She explains that probation is a privilege, not a right, and privileges can be taken away. This time it's a mother in court. Cry while describing how her son lost his way. Addiction, peer pressure, depression, the path that destroys so many young people. The judge listens with empathy. But at the end of the day, emotional pain doesn't erase legal responsibility. Compassion does not cancel consequence. The defendant tries one last time to plead for help instead of prison. He promises change, sobriety, obedience. But the judge has heard these same words before, from him. Patterns matter in court. And this pattern is too dangerous to ignore. A case involving property damage takes a sudden turn when the judge learns the defendant has a long record of similar behavior. What seemed like a small case becomes a larger story about repeat offenses. And when someone keeps repeating the same mistake, courts eventually step in harder. The defendant claims it was an accident, but the judge asks a simple question, why did it happen again? And he has no answer. Silence in court speaks louder than excuses. A young mother appears next. She violated probation by leaving the county without permission. Her explanation is emotional. She left to help family during a crisis. The judge understands, but still must enforce the law. Rules matter. If rules were optional, there would be no justice system. The prosecutor argues that she lied multiple times during the investigation. The judge now faces a difficult balance. Compassion for a struggling mother versus accountability for repeated dishonesty. In the end, truth always weighs heavier. A defendant charged with drug possession stands shaking, saying he never meant to hurt anyone. But the judge reminds him, addiction is not your fault, but your choices are. It is one of the most powerful lessons the courtroom teaches. The prosecutor explains that he refused rehab several times. You cannot help someone who refuses to help themselves. And that truth shapes the judge's final decision. Another man steps up, accused of violating protection order. He swears he was only trying to talk. But the judge firmly reminds him that talking can still be danger when the law says stay away. This case becomes a lesson in boundaries and consequences for ignoring them. A defendant with a history of domestic issues tells the court he has changed, but the files show recent violence. The judge must now decide whom to believe, his words or his history. And in courtrooms, history usually wins. Next comes a case involving stolen property. The defendant says he was desperate, broke, out of options, but the judge replies softly, "Many people struggle. Not everyone steals." And that truth hangs in the air. The prosecutor adds that he tried to sell the stolen items online. That detail destroys the desperation defense. It wasn't a mistake, it was a plan. A woman stands before the judge, accused of repeatedly ignoring probation meetings. She says she was overwhelmed with work and childcare. But the judge reminds her, probation must come before everything, because freedom comes before nothing. The judge offers her treatment programs and help, but warns, this is your last chance. Don't let life distract you from saving your future. Her tears show she finally understands. A defendant facing weapon charges tries to explain why he carried a gun illegally. He talks about fear, threats, and living in a dangerous neighborhood. The judge understands that fear, but also sees a danger in his choices. The prosecutor points out that the gun was loaded, cocked, and ready. This wasn't fear, it was risk. A risk the law cannot ignore. A man with multiple theft charges begs a court for rehabilitation instead of jail. He says addiction pushed him into crime. The judge listens and considers treatment, but the pattern of behavior pulls her toward a stricter decision. The prosecutor argues that he used rehab as an excuse before and relapsed immediately. Programs cannot work if the person refuses to try. That becomes the turning point of the hearing. A young woman stands for sentencing after lying to police about a hit and run. She says she panicked. Judges hear that word often, but panic doesn't undo danger. Panic doesn't undo damage. The prosecutor reveals that her lie cost investigators hours and almost let the real suspect escape consequences. That detail changes everything. The courtroom grows cold. A teen charged with burglary enters trembling. His mother cries in the back row. The judge looks at him long and hard, seeing a boy who could still turn his life around or fall deeper into darkness. The prosecutor warns that the teen worked with older criminals. That influences the judge's thinking. Was he a follower or willingly part of the crime? The answer decides his future. A defendant facing drug trafficking charges stands quietly. This is not small-time possession. This is distribution, poison that destroys communities. The judge's expression grows stern. The prosecutor explains how much was found. Enough to prove intent to sell. The judge knows the sentence must protect the community. This one will not end lightly. The final case is emotional. A man facing years in prison begs for one last chance to be with his children. The judge listens with compassion, but also with duty. Sometimes the hardest part of justice is doing the right thing, even when it breaks someone's heart.